Bonjour, Patrick.
Bonjour.
Thanks for being with us from New York.
You're welcome. Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm very happy that you accepted. Actually, you replied to me in the same day, and I was super excited because I discovered a video of yours on YouTube about sleep and how to move in our sleep, kind of.
Yeah.
And because of this situation where we started doing podcasts online, the fact that you were in New York didn't seem so far anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
that's the amazing thing about this time is we get to connect with people that we wouldn't normally be able to connect with. I've been able to take classes with some of my teachers that are in California now, and I love that. I love this. You know, it's tragic in some ways, but it's also opening us up to new ways of interacting with each other, which is great.
Yes, our schedules are different, and I don't know, I guess it's the same for you, but since so many things are canceled, we have some space and calm in our daily lives that I didn't have before in this way, and we are accessible and attentive and more, I feel more focused. I don't know for you, but
oh, absolutely. You know, and to talk about, like, we were going to talk about rest and sleep, and, you know, this has been an opportunity, I think, you know, and I know for me to really reevaluate what my schedule has been like, so that I can actually get rested, actually get a full night's sleep, you know, or where I think at one point I was on a schedule where I was always feeling a little under-rested and underslept. And now it's different. Now I can reevaluate that. I think that's pretty cool.
Did you, like, that was one of my questions, actually. You described yourself as an adrenaline junkie.
Oh, yeah.
You love thrilling sports, and now you are into restorative movement, this idea of, I think, slowing down and healing. So what happened between the two?
You know, the short of it is that I think at a certain point my body kind of broke down. So I was really into, like, just the whole idea, the whole notion of moving towards extreme sports. I was like a really aggressive downhill skier. I did triathlons and rock climbing and lots of running and martial arts and all sorts of all these really, really great activities. But then I started injuring myself pretty badly. I tore both of my ACLs in my knees and my meniscus in my knees, not all at once. I did it like year after year after year, throughout from the end of high school all the way through my college years, totaling, so let's say I think I had about 6 knee surgeries. And I think it's probably about that time where after each one, I just didn't really get the message. You know, I wanted to train really hard to recover from my knee surgery so I can get back out there and start moving again. But by the time I had, like, my 6th surgery, I think my ego had to let go a bit, and I had to just realize I needed to find a different way. And that brought me to learn, to discover yoga and just the whole concept of restoring your nervous system to relax. I had so much tension bound up in me that I think it was partly the cause of some of my injuries. And so yoga helped me kind of, like, really learn how to relax, how to see a different way of being healthy. And that just drove me down this whole perspective that I can be, eventually I got to the point where I could be just as active as I was before, but I'm not so, I'm just not so stressed out about it. I don't force my body to do something that it doesn't want to do anymore.
Mm-hmm. It's very different when our actions come from an outside place or voice telling us you have to do this, or you need to, versus when it comes from inside of you, and it's kind of fulfilling instead of depleting your gas tank. That's how I felt before. Like, I had a gas tank and I would run empty. And then right now it comes from inside, and it's so weird to explain, but life doesn't feel the same anymore when we rest.
That's amazing. Yeah. No, and I hope that that's the trajectory that we're starting to become more and more aware of, is that that the way for us to best thrive in our life is not necessarily from trying to fit some mold that has been prescribed to us and trying to, become something that we are emulating from outside of us, but that we're trying to figure out what it is that works best for us on the inside. Um, there's a person that I love to follow. Her name is Martha Beck. She's like one of these, one of the most renowned like life coaches before they even named people life coaches. And she's quoting somebody else when she says this, but I love it, and it really applies to, I think, a lot of what we're talking about. Is that one of her mantras is to never do anything more. She says, never do anything more than you can do while in peace. Like you need to be kind of still and at peace within yourself in order to actually achieve anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just a great way to approach,
Yes.
most of life.
I think when we do it outside of peace, it's not a bonus, it's a credit. Like, that's how I see it now. It's not a bonus, it's a credit. So if you skip 2 hours of sleep, we kind of see it as a bonus. Oh, I gained 2 hours to do more stuff. But no, it's a credit. You have to rest. It's going to come back eventually. So it's just, you're And
you're going to pay for it on the other end somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Whether it's in your health or your relationships or your stress levels.
Mm-hmm. And being peaceful is not being passive. I think it's very hard to not have this vision as a society that being at peace is not being lazy or just passive and just watching life passing in front of us. Like we can be.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's where the yoga aspect came into, like, really kind of changed my perspective in thinking. Because aside from yoga being just like a physical practice, the underlying philosophy, one of the main things that comes from the Bhagavad Gita is there's a great phrase in it that says, a yogi is he who can find stillness within action, and also action within stillness. And so the whole idea is to be, and I'm interpreting stillness as peace, as being at one with oneself. And so no matter what you're doing, you're always connected to that stillness inside. Mm. And I think that completely changes the trajectory of how you move.
Mm-hmm. It's you don't see yourself from an outside perspective on how you're supposed to look like or what's the mechanical movement, but out of a feeling. And it's interesting. I read the article. There's a lengthy article on your website explaining your journey, actually, which was very interesting. And you kind of, I really liked it. You said that even if yoga is supposed to be a place of healing, our ego can kick in and we can be kind of obsessed about the form and not about the feeling anymore. And we can injure ourselves in yoga too, if we keep this mindset of just doing more and pushing our limits all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was, and then that's my kind of observation in the yoga, or modern yoga culture, is we've made it more into a sport, in Western culture. And it's great. It's good for us in one sense. But if we're not dealing with the underlying issues, like I wanted to be kind of more of an extreme sport type of person, and I kind of brought that into my yoga practice in some ways. And at first it was quite healing, but over time, as I got better at it, I think I started then going like, okay, but if I push more and if I can make myself back bend deeper, for some reason that was going to give me some sense of self-worth, and that just led to more injury again. It made me more unstable in my body and less comfortable, and so again and again, it's like this kind of feedback to go like, okay, so what's really the underlying issue here? How do you find balance?
How did it feel at the time when, like, leaving some thrilling sports, and yoga seemed that like this place for healing, and when it didn't work fully, how did you feel? That, like, was it very hard, or you already had another perspective of something else to do to heal more? I don't know if it.
I I went through a lot of periods of real frustration. Yeah, for sure. I was like really frustrated and agitated, and from a higher perspective, I can probably see that, okay, that's my ego trying to hold on. But no, I really thought, well, okay, well, maybe if I just do more yoga, maybe if I just do more, that's going to help. And it took a while because what I really feel like what happened is, like, when I was in those moments of frustration or in those moments of needing to achieve something, I was sort of not following what was my, like, sort of more inner guidance at that point, and I've always been, more connected to nature, or wanting to connect more to nature. That's where, like, those first sports started, like going out hiking and rock climbing and mountain climbing and skiing. It was kind of all just being outside. That's what it was all about. And then when I got so immersed in yoga, it was great for many reasons, but I felt still sort of like I didn't have that outside connection anymore. And it took a while that once I started to get back into that and figure out, like, more about natural movement, then I started to feel that reconnection again,
Mm-hmm. Can you present briefly what is natural movement for people who doesn't know?
Yeah. The natural movement is really cool as a practice. Now, there's, natural movement as a category, and then there's natural movement as a specific practice, which is often referred to as MoveNat. And MoveNat is a training system developed by a guy named Erwan Lacour, who's from France originally, but I think he lives in Arizona now. And natural movement as a category is just really like everything that humans evolved to do out in nature, like we evolved in accord with nature. And so the movements that we do to survive are the things that we're built for. And that includes everything from just walking to sitting to crawling to running to climbing to jumping to lifting and carrying and manipulating objects to fighting to swimming. It's all those things we are able to categorize as natural movements. And MoveNat and in like a natural movement training system is about, like, how do we reintegrate those movements into our lives? How do we relearn how to do those again? And because the real issue that we're finding as a culture is, and they use this great metaphor is, like, we're kind of zoo animals now. We've kind of caged ourselves into unnatural environments that are mismatched for how we evolved. So we are moving in these unnatural environments and losing the ability to move as we were intended to. And so natural movement is just relearning how to do those things that should be instinctual.
And
And
we kind of, sorry.
No, go ahead.
We have sports who kind of sometimes integrate some of those movements in a very specific way. And we forget that it comes from a natural, like from task that we had to do to survive before. And right now we kind of extracted only the mechanical aspect. And sometimes even out of sports, we created very specific exercises. So we're focused on the mechanical movement, but I think there's no meaning anymore. We forget that.
Yeah.
We were not curling our biceps just for like just the sake of doing it. Like it was like just a tool to achieve something bigger.
Yeah, no, and that's such an important point, because exercise itself is made up. it's like, it's a totally artificial construct. And we've created exercise to kind of fill this gap of not moving our bodies. And we've discovered like our bodies are getting unhealthy. And so we decide, oh, we have to move more. So let's create these exercises to bring health back into our lives. And you're totally right. It loses the concept, the context, you know, like there's no reason to be doing this curl. And I think that's one of the biggest things that makes us then like so disinterested. I mean, a lot of people really love exercise, and that's great. But a lot of people, one of the biggest failures, I would say, of the health industry is just giving people things to do that are so out of context that nobody has an intrinsic value to it. Nobody really goes, well, okay, why should I be walking on this treadmill or whatever? You know, why do I have to lift this weight? And that's one of the things that I really love about the natural movement practice, is that it puts everything in context. You know, you can, whether you're actually inside in a gym or elsewhere, you can imagine why this is useful. You know, if I needed to pick up something and put it up higher, if I had a skill and practice of that, that is my exercise. If I had to, I don't know, like run from point A to B, do I know how to do that efficiently? You know, so it's context, I think, really matters.
Yes, and it's kind of weird we imagine, we see that certain contexts are for moving, like the gym is for moving, the sports club is for moving, but in our homes we want to be comfortable, and if we have to make a physical effort, it's kind of a burden, and we feel like a peasant. I don't know how to explain it, but it's like, oh, I have to lift that thing. If only I could pay someone to do it for me, or it can be delivered to my home, like to my door. And it kind of like like a switch happened in my mind. Why do I disdain like lifting my mattress to put it aside during the day, but I'm willing to lift weights, to pay to lift weights elsewhere? It's just, we really we took movement out of our daily lives for sure.
Yeah, and that's it's like such an ingrained instinct in us. And you know, I've done some reading and thinking about this, and that like I believe that as we evolved out in nature, there's sort of like this ingrained instinct for us to conserve energy, because just to survive and do all the business of daily living, it takes so much energy. So we have this sort of ingrained like instinct to go, okay, I don't need to do anything right now. I'm going to rest. I'm going to relax. I'm going to, you know, conserve. But then as our cultures and societies developed, we've, you know, all our technology has created conveniences, which have led towards comfort, which all have led towards us not having to move very much. And so we're really, you know, there's actually a book I think called, oh, I can't remember the name of the book, but it's like the comfort dilemma or something like that. It's about the problem with comfort is that we never grow. You know, we never, you know, we can't actually thrive in an environment that's only about comfort. And so our homes are really designed for that. Like it's designed for comfort. It's like our couches, our chairs, all the cushy things, our you know, appliances are all designed to make us move less. And we're comfortable with that. And so, but then we know kind of instinctually we have to, or we know kind of intellectually that we have to go outside or go to a gym or go to some place to move. And I think that's one of the biggest things that is this mismatch, is that we've compartmentalized so much of our life that there's really no way to get all the healthy movement that we need, you know, because we can only spend an hour or two at a gym, but we're spending 16 to 23 hours in another environment, either at home or work, that aren't categorized as movement places. And
Mm-hmm.
so we end up not moving.
Yeah, and I think this idea of home equaling comfort comes from nature as well. We needed a shelter. We need to feel protected and secure and be able to rest and socialize at peace. But in modern life, and the challenges were outside, right? The outside world was messy and chaotic, and you kind of have to learn to navigate all the other animals around you. But in modern life, there's no challenge, almost no challenge outside whatsoever. Like it's just not there anymore. So everything is comfort. So the home is like it just became more fluffy and stuff and everything.
Yeah.
And the beds are a good reflection of this. Like there's an association in our mind that a thick mattress is the top of luxury, right? And we
Yeah.
are ready to pay thousands of dollars, and the image of us sleeping on the floor is just unimaginable. But
Yeah.
I realized that actually I like sleeping on the floor now, which is why I started searching on this and saying, well, how do we sleep in nature? And then I stumbled upon your video. But it's interesting to just close the loop on comfort, the comfort dilemma. It's interesting because you lived a life of very high intensity. So total chaos is not, and total comfort are not the solutions. It's always the moving between the two. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. It's like any extreme sustained too long is going to, lead to some sort of deterioration, some sort of either too much comfort's going to just make us deteriorate in the way that we're getting weaker and atrophying, and we're not getting the movement nutrients we need. But too much extremity is going to also break us down, whether that's just out of stress or literally wearing and tearing on our joints and our body movements. I like the comfort thing with the bed. Just reminded me of that old fable of I don't know if you know it, of the princess and the pea. And I think we've all sort of we've taken the message that we kind of aspire to that. Like the message I think generally in that is that of that fable was that the princess was so sensitive that she could, on like stacks of mattresses, could sense one little pea like way deep below and couldn't sleep and was too uncomfortable to sleep. And that was supposed to be a good thing. Mm-hmm. I don't know, maybe because that made her sensitive to, I don't know what it was, like to the needs of her subjects or something. But I think actually that has become the ideal so much that we're not realizing that is robbing us of opportunities for our bodies to actually move and be healthy.
Mm-hmm. We need external forces, like the external environment shape our bodies, and it's we bonded over Kathy Bowman because she's the one who kind of came up with this vision that movement is not all about big and intense movement, but also the small movement of your hands, and also the pressure that is applied to your body, which doesn't qualify sometimes as movement, not even as exercise, but not even as movement. And that's when the way we sleep, our postures during sleeping become interesting. And did you came to the subject of sleep because you had trouble with sleeping, or it was something else? Like,
no, like when I started to explore that as far as like movement stuff and how I'm sleeping, it really came from just my, curiosity and learning more about movement and working with Katie Bowman. I'm certified in from her Nutritious Movement Institute, and teach restorative exercise. So a lot of that learning is opening our perspective to see like where are we both moving too much in parts of our body and where are we moving too little in parts of our body. And I just found it really fascinating to have that perspective opened up to me, that while sleeping, when we are using beds, for example, but this is the same for couches. It's the same principle of what is happening when we're wearing shoes. We are sort of, they use the term casting our bodies. So like if you break an arm, for example, and they put a cast on your arm, they do that to keep your arm from moving. And that helps the bone reset. But the negative aspect of that is that then all your muscles atrophy and the tissues stiffen and they lose the ability to move. And we can extrapolate that as an analogy to like all the things that make us move less. And our beds would be, our beds would qualify for one of those things. Because what's so crazy about the bed is that, let's take this into the natural environment. If we had to say lay on out on the ground, there might be some squishiness if you're like on peat moss and stuff like that. But generally the ground is fairly hard. There might be sticks, there might be rocks, there might be all that kind of stuff. But the ground itself has some firmness to it. And that, when we lay down on it, it requires our body to move. It actually pushes against our body. Whereas a bed, our bed moves to conform to our body, rather than our body having to move to conform to the ground on which we're sleeping. And I find that so fascinating because it actually turns out there is a whole category of movement called that you could call pressure deforming movements. And it's when something pushes against you, it actually gives signals to the cells in your body to change and to shift and to adapt. And if we're not getting any of those pressure deforming movements in our body, there's a lot of parts of us that are never moved. And then they get stiffer and they get weaker and they atrophy. And it's the same principle as massage. Like when you go to a masseuse and you notice like when, I always think this is funny, is when you go to a masseuse and the masseuse like touches you on your shoulders and you go, oh my God, I didn't know I was so tight there. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason for that is that we've just adapted to that particular tension and not moving in those areas that we don't even perceive it anymore. Mm-hmm. And so this is kind of just like a long explanation around the idea that I was so intrigued about like how sleeping on a harder surface like the floor could actually make my body healthier by moving it more.
What was your sleep arrangement before? Like a classic bed?
Just classic bed. We actually have a Tempur-Pedic mattress, which is really nice and delicious.
Is it the one that cools down?
No, we don't. Well, we don't have the cooling one, but yeah. I mean, it's supposed to stay cool. I don't know, but I don't know how much of that is marketing. But it was just a nice big squishy bed, and and we still have it, by the way. But, I just tend to. I've shifted now, and now it's there, but I tend to sleep on the floor most often.
Right off, like nothing. What's beneath you, like behind?
Well, we have a little rug. And then what I usually tend to do is I have a little padding. I just put a couple blankets down, mm-hmm. and I just put some blankets down to lay on top of, and it's enough. It's probably half an inch of padding or something in total.
It's interesting how in the Western world, like sleeping on a thin mattress is for the guests at home, like that sometimes have a very shitty mattress, right? And normally we have a very bad night of sleeping on this mattress, but we sleep badly mostly because we are not resilient anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. Resilience is a great term. Our body is not adaptable anymore. It only can conform to one thing. It's like mm-hmm. the same thing. Like if you always wear the same pair of shoes, like as soon as you change into some other pair of shoes, it feels really strange and you don't know what to do with it. Or maybe your feet get sore. we need so much variability to make us resilient. We need to, our body needs to have this capability to adapt to whatever environment we're in. And that's why I love it. And sometimes, it's actually, it's a good wake-up call. Like if you can't sleep on just a different mattress, that's the princess and the pea thing. It's like, oh no, there's a tiny pebble in my 10 stacks of mattresses that I can't sleep anymore. That it should be an alarm bell.
And it's not because we have this vision that we, as humans, we're very smart people, and we can create stuff to make our life more comfortable. So our body doesn't have to do the work anymore. And over time, every movement we can make, it can be done by a machine or very simple tools. Just a cup is a way not to have to fold our hands and get water from a river or something, right? You can just, all those small things. We don't even talk about how our car helps us move, but just the very daily small things. And we have this vision that if like we don't sleep well on a mattress, it's the mattress fault, right? It's not about our body, never. And we want to increase comfort. But in some cultures, that was fascinating to realize. And in the Western world, we have this idea of what a bed is. And it's a certain height. And normally it's the height of you just sitting. You don't even have to squat, right? You just have to sit. And you have a night table right beside you, exactly at the length of your, like the height of your arm. But in some cultures, like in Japan, like they sleep on very thin mattress on the floor, and it's
yeah, and that's a really great example of the notion of casting again, and the same thing that we're talking about. It's like the reason we have, well, it's not the only reason, but one of the reasons, or maybe it's not even the reason. It might be the consequence or the effect of having chairs at a certain height, and our couches at a certain height, even our toilet seats at a certain height. It is accommodating the lack of movement that we have in our hips and our knees and our back. And it's accommodating for maybe people who have limited ranges of motion. Maybe you are unable to fully squat or get to the ground. And so instead of looking inside and going, okay, now how do I work on myself to be able to move better and move more and get stronger and more flexible? You go, well, the environment's bad. I need to make the environment more comfortable, the environment more accommodating. And you try to change all the world outside of you rather than trying to figure out how you're supposed to be moving.
And it's a vicious circle, because the less we move, the less we have to move, the more problems we have and the more limitations we have. And we don't always realize that's because we don't move enough, and we create more stuff to support us. Like if we can't squat anymore, then we will have a chair, but we'll add some padding and some stuff to lift us
Yes.
And it's just never ending. Like you're in this circle of, you always need more stuff to support you. But it can also be a very positive circle where you start to get rid of your things and your body becomes stronger because of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you see this with, like, it made me think about like crutches and all these things that we use to support our bodies. Like orthotics are a big example, in shoes. People say my feet hurt when I don't wear shoes, so I'm going to get a shoe that's built up more to support the arches of my feet and pad my heels and all this stuff, not realizing that what those are another form of cast that actually limits how your foot moves. And with that example, it's like there is no actual structure in the bones of the body that create an arch in the foot. It's actually the strength and tension through the musculature of the foot that creates that arch, the healthy arch. But if you put some padding underneath it, there's a particular bridge that's like that. If you put a what is that? I can't remember the name. It's like the cornerstone of a bridge. If you put a support structure underneath it, you you completely destroy the function of the bridge. Like it loses its integrity. The same thing I think is happening with our bodies in general, but specifically with the feet. Like if you put arch support under there, all the muscles don't have to work anymore. And because they don't have to work, they get weaker, they get tighter, they get smaller. And then you lose, and it's that vicious cycle again. You kind of lose the ability to move. And so, and again, we just get into this, we come up with all these examples of, in order to move better, we actually just have to find ways to move more.
And changing the bed is a way, because just the act of squatting every day to go to a low bed is beneficial over time. And it's going to help us in other sphere and activities of our lives for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, you know, it's less even about, like, you could have a harder bed surface that's higher, and that would be fine. That would be something. But giving yourself a firmer surface, and requiring yourself to get all the way to the ground is just that extra benefit. It gives you an environment that encourages you to move more. And that's something that I've been really like looking at a lot. We started talking earlier about like compartmentalizing our homes, and then versus our exercise spaces, our gyms. And I really feel that what we need to find is, let's say it this way, is that we will move in accord with the environment in which we're living. We're going to move, and we're going to adapt to the habitat in which we live, just like any other wild animal. And so if we can kind of rethink our habitat, if we can think, okay, well, if my home actually requires me to move more, I'm just going to do it. And then I don't have to think about, oh, did I get all my squats in today? I just go like, well, no, I had to get to the floor to lay down.
We had to remove some temptations in our apartment. Following Katie Bowman, we got rid of our couch to buy a very kind of smooshy carpet. And at nighttime, we put our futon over it, and that's where we sleep. And during the day, we put it in the wardrobe, and we love it. But if the couch was there all the time, for sure I would be sitting, because it's made to be appealing. Like we created this, we designed over the years some furniture that is made to make us feel good and want to sit on them.
I think that's so cool. Yeah, no, I and that's the notion, is if something is just not there, then you quickly adapt to just incorporating that motion into your life. And we still have a couch, of course, but you know, because we have a couch, it actually takes me more mental effort to choose something else. There's a positive psychology researcher named Sean Aker. He's got a really cool book on happiness. And I always think about, he had a great analogy in there, or not an analogy, an anecdote about, there's something about like an action potential threshold that we have. And it's this real psychological thing that when something is easier to do, we're going to do it. When something takes a lot more steps before you can do the thing that you want to do, we're just not going to do it. And he uses in his book, he uses an example of, he wanted to learn how to play the guitar. And because he's a researcher himself, he kind of gave himself a test. He's like, I'm going to see how many times I play the guitar in the next 30 days. 30 days went by, and it turns out he like never played the guitar. He never did it. And then he thought about, okay, why didn't I do this? And turns out his guitar was like packed away in the closet. And it just like was too many steps that he had to like take the guitar out of the closet, out of the case, set up his music stand. And just that many steps stopped his whole desire from actually wanting to go out and do it. And so then the next 30 days, he changed it, and he just put his guitar in the living room. He just had a stand, left it out, And then boom, he's practicing every day because it's there. And so that's our environment. And we're doing the same thing with our couches and our shoes and our beds and all the conveniences, our Vitamixes.
Yeah.
I love my Vitamix, but I could probably get a lot more movement if I had a mortar and pestle and I was just grinding it.
Yeah. Well, if we start looking at like the amount of work it would take to do what we have in our homes by ourselves, we would do this almost full time. And we still have a blender, which I love. It's an old Osterizer blender. And I could put the bottom on a mason jar. So it's just super, I love it. And sometimes we love some of our stuff and we can keep them, but we have to be mindful of also willingly doing some efforts to compensate the fact that our habitat can do everything for us now. And
I think a lot of that, I think a lot of that is choice. And I think that's where I get excited about it, is like, because there's a reason we have like culture and society and technology and conveniences. It's because it allows us to do something else besides just try to survive all day long. And we can make advances that are good, but I think it's really cool to then be aware of the things that are letting us move less or might be detrimental to our health. And then we can just make the choice. We can go, okay, I know this is like letting me move very little and I don't have to do anything to get whatever I want, but it's going to allow me to do something else I want to do. And as long as I know I'm making that choice, I think that's a good step onto like being able to take more, just more power back for ourselves to learn how to make ourselves healthier.
It goes back to this idea of being mindful. I had a discussion with our last guest. We talked about order and chaos and how, again, too much of one is bad. And I think we live in a society sometimes where the order we follow is not, or the structure we follow is not the structure we would have built. Like we learn to be obedient. So order or structure per se is not bad, but it can be if it doesn't reflect the type of life that you want. And I like with Renard to kind of snap and kind of bring a spark where we see our daily lives in a new light, and we realize that we have a choice, and that our homes are built out of conventions. Is that
convention? Yeah, absolutely.
It's not a rule. It's not a rule that you need a couch. It's not a rule that the bed should be a certain height. It's just a convention. And we don't know why anymore it's there or why it's the size it is. And I started to feel very playful when you look around and you say, well, that doesn't have to be here. And I can sleep on the floor. So it's just kind of became a game to challenge everything we have.
I love that. I love to think about things as a game and challenges and play, because that's really how we learn. As a species, we learn mostly through play, and we have such a there's some interesting terms that people use called like attentional blindness, for example. Like our minds are really good filters, and we will see what we expect to see. And so we will use our chairs in one certain way, and we will use our couches in one certain way. And then the floors are not for sitting. The floors are for walking upon and keeping things off of it. I don't know, but but then if you can start to play and think, okay, well, this is a game. How do I change the use of this so that you can get there's like an infinite array of possibilities that you can start to incorporate then and just get more movement throughout your whole daily life. And it's interesting. It's just fun.
Yeah, I think it was one of your Facebook posts, the first one I saw after we connected. was, I think you use your Bosu ball to put your computer on and work
Oh
on,
yeah.
on your ball. And exactly, if you think that this ball has one function, then you always see it that way. But if you think any object can be used to pile some stuff,
Yeah,
and
exactly. Yeah, you know, and that's like, you know, I have like this exercise equipment thing, this Bosu ball, and which is, you know, for balancing on, or for people do other sort of cardio exercises that. But if you just kind of look at the structure of it and you go like, oh, well, I need a flat surface and I want to sit on the floor. How do I use, I could use this, and I could flip it over and use the flat side of the Bosu ball as a kind of a balancy computer stand. And it was pretty cool, you know. And I like to just kind of, and I love this about, to go back to the natural movement and the MoveNat stuff, is once you sort of learn about all the possibilities of how we are designed to interact with our environments, you know, as primates, really, once you go outside, then all the contours, all the objects, all the things that you encounter outside become possibilities for movement. So I see a park bench and I don't think, oh, I'm just going to sit on that. I think, oh, this would be fun to jump over or vault over, or maybe I can crawl under it. And you just start to see more and more possibilities. Once you have a bigger vocabulary of movement in your body, you know, everything becomes something to interact with a little bit differently.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And we tend to forget that nature is our home. We have this vision of being separate from nature, and like being having walls around us is just common, and walking on a flat ground like is just normalcy. But again, normalcy doesn't mean it's beneficial. It's just how things evolve, sometimes slowly over time. And even though there's a logical reason or some benefits to it, I think sometimes we need to go back very far in our history and look at how we evolved as animals. We don't want to admit we're still animals, and we need nature, and the natural environment is so rich in stimulation, and we try to reproduce it at home with technologies again. Talking with Vince about beds, we realized we got super sick 2 years ago. We got mononucleose.
Oh yeah, mononucleosis. Yeah, mono.
So we were super tired. There was a heat wave in Montreal. Our room was not, there was no air. So we slept on the balcony in the city.
Wow.
And we actually liked it because we realized we had the wind on us and it was more cooler outside. And then we realized that it's like, that's how we can sleep. Like as humans, it just seems so weird now to sleep on a balcony in the city. But right now there are beds, like I asked if you had the cooling beds, because some people invented a bed that is cooling to imitate the fact that the temperature is lowering during the night. And we can have a light that reproduces the sunlight, and we can have a machine that makes bird sounds. And
yes, yeah, we have everything that's trying to artificially recreate a sense of nature. And I guess, you know, and if you have no nature around you, if you are in the dense, like Manhattan, you know, skyrise somewhere, I think that could be beneficial.
exactly.
But
yeah,
we then sometimes forget that you could just open the window.
yes.
You know,
I think this, yeah. We love technology. There's this thrill to inventing something. But I realize that the technologies we love the most are the ones that feel friendly and human and natural. But sometimes just doing a movement and an effort to go outside, you have all those benefits, and it didn't require building stuff at all. Like just going outside. And
yeah. It doesn't require it. And there's a couple things in there that you said that really sparked some thoughts for me. Is there's this usual perception that what is normal is the order of things. Because we think things are supposed to be as they are, like the way most people sleep, in beds, or the way we tend to walk, for example, and our walking gait. Most people just think of the typical walking gait as being normal. But the question to ask is it actually natural? And normal and natural are off, especially in modern society, are not the same, and if we could be healthy with our normal, that would be great. But our bodies are so adapted to be in nature, it's still like it takes millions of years to adapt away from nature, if that will ever happen, and why should it? But that we actually have this imperative to get back to something that is closer to nature for us to be healthy, So like I think about walking gait, for example, is like we have a typical walking gait, and I study some of this in my classes and whatnot, but that we tend to like kind of fall forward as we walk, and we catch ourselves with each step. But is that actually a natural walking gait? Not necessarily, because we've adapted to moving a certain way because of our shoes and our flat surfaces and the amount of time we spend sitting, that our whole bodies have become normalized to something that's not natural, and which may be more of a posterior push off. And we can get into a whole other podcast on that. But that's just like moving the body maybe in the opposite way that we think is normal. And it's the same with like our beds, and our home environments, like flat level floors, cushy chairs and seats. It's not really it's not really natural, but we're so normalized that we can't see any other possibility.
And we would feel weird doing something else. I
Yeah.
know it helped you to switch to barefoot, minimal shoes, and even walking barefoot. But I think that how people saw you kind of shifted. You became the weirdo with those shoes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, yeah, and it's a little less now, but even when I started doing it maybe 10 years ago, everybody was like, "Oh my God, you don't have shoes on." And, I'm not going in the subway without shoes or anything, just because there's a certain amount of convention and
Yes.
culture that you have to abide to. But if I'm walking down the street or in the park and I don't have shoes on, I'm getting a lot more healthy benefit from that by the mobilization of my feet and the sensation of the ground on my feet. There's a whole concept of earthing that you can get by being barefoot, but it's not normal. and people really do. And we have to, in order to get healthier, I think we have to remake the culture. We have to make a new normal, that's closer to nature. And
yeah, and some barefoot shoes. I had to shop for them last week because Vince has one pair of shoes left and there's a hole under it. So we're waiting for the package to arrive. So I had to kind of shop online, and it did become very normal again. Like the shoes, you can wear them without looking different. So it's kind of being trendy even, right? Which is a kind of a good thing. But walking completely barefoot is the optimal solution. Eventually, we have this wonderful machine that has been built over millions of years, like you said, to sense the environment around us. And if we put a layer under it, it doesn't function to its full potential. And I think it's the same with the body at rest. And if we can come back to sleep, because I told you before we started that I love to explore during a podcast, but with this one, I really want to talk about sleep because there's so little information about it.
Yeah.
And you're one of the only person I found so far that really talks about our postures as well. So we talked about our habitat, but the way we position our bodies is also very important. So can you introduce the video that I saw on YouTube and where it came from, the inspiration of doing kind of
Yeah.
this?
So this, it started from and this is in combination with my studies with Katie Bowman, but also it was where we were looking at an article written by a physiotherapist named Michael Tetley, and his journey, kind of basically was that he traveled around the world, and he was noticing that in traveling and for lack of a better term, like and cultures that were closely in tune with nature, they had very different sleep habits than we did. Their resting postures were, adapted to being on the ground. And he talked about the physiological benefits that he saw from that, is that he felt like the pressures, and we talked about this a little earlier, these pressure deforming movements, like the ground pushing against the rib cage and the chest and the back, actually can help reset the spine and can help realign the body. If you get kind of kinks or you're kind of out of alignment a little bit because of whatever you've been doing through the day, the laying on the ground helps reset that those bones, which wouldn't happen if you're in a cushier bed or mattress. And so there's the one side of that, of like seeing the physiological benefits of a harder ground. But then he also noticed in different cultures and for different scenarios, there were like real particular postures that people were sleeping in. And what's kind of cool about it was that it was everything was in context. We talked about this with exercise earlier, of how like with natural movement, there's a context to it. Like, I'm going to climb a tree, there's a reason I'm moving my body that way, because it helps me climb the tree. And in these other cultures, like where people would be, let's say, hunting and gathering, they're out in the woods and they're sleeping, they would be sleeping in a way that would have a context to it. It would, for some people, for some of them, they slept in a way that kept them ready, that they could actually jump up really fast if they needed to, like say a predator came. And they slept in a way where maybe one ear was, kind of up, which seems kind of normal, but they would be able to listen to see if anybody was approaching around them, even while they're resting. I like there was a good example of, I think it was, I don't know the word they were using, I think caravaneers was the term, is a traveling monks in Tibet. I don't know if they were monks actually, but they're traveling people in Tibet would sleep in what we would think of like child's pose in yoga, where you're just kind of resting over your thighs with your shins on the ground. And that one was really illuminating, because the reason for doing that was that it's very cold there, and the shins don't have a lot of fleshy tissue, and the bones apparently don't conduct a lot of heat through them, or absorb a lot of the coldness, and so they could sleep on their shins and not get cold. So it's really cool to think that there's all these different positions that you could be sleeping in, which is very different than what we would think of. What we normally do is just sleep in one position. I just lay on my side, or I lay on my back.
Mm-hmm.
But that I could lay with my one leg out to the side. I can sleep on my arms. I can sleep in a child's pose. And the context and the variability really kind of woke me up to the fact that, oh, if I had practiced this, if I experimented with it enough, I could be comfortable enough to sleep in these positions.
Have you tried to sleep as a child, like in the child pose?
In the child's pose? I haven't actually done that one yet. I've spent time in child's pose. I've rested there, but I haven't actually tried sleeping there yet.
My dad gave me this example years ago. I don't remember why, but I always, when I do yoga, it always come up to my mind, the voice of my dad telling me some people slept in this position.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I read the article from Michael Tetley and saw the pictures, I was, oh my God, that was true. I thought it was just a like a saying, and I thought, oh, I gotta try this. I haven't done it yet, but I'm thinking, I remembered, when you're super tired, or when I'm traveling, I can sleep anywhere. I can fall asleep like on a chair, and we kind of, sometimes we don't do it because it's not culturally appropriated to sleep in public. But doing research on how people sleep around the world, you realize that in some cultures, it's not bad to sleep in public. And in some other cultures, they sleep together. Like this idea that a bedroom is one bed for privacy, intimacy, and calm is just almost an exception in the human lives. Like some cultures.
Yeah, that's so fascinating.
And I think it's this moment of flip. When you see something different, it makes you realize that the way you live is your normal, but it's not the only possibility. And the human is much more flexible than we think it is. And when we take the pillow out, we feel sore because we think we need a pillow, but we need a pillow because we slept with a pillow for our whole lives, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's again back to like normal versus natural. And what's so cool, and it's just like the reason for not having a bed, requires more movement to get to the floor. Not having a pillow is a great, thing to work towards, because it actually can allow for more movement of the neck. And we're taught, and there's all these commercials like, oh, you get this special pillow and it'll hold your neck perfectly aligned with your spine. Okay, sure. But then like we might as well be in a full body cast all the time. Yeah. Like our spines are supposed to move. The only problem is when we are always stuck in one position. And it's as problematic to be stuck in just a straight line all the time as it is to like be stuck over here. So pillows are great. Removing pillows are great because it actually does. It's a great experiment to see how much flexibility you actually have in your neck.
And it is uncomfortable at first, but there are ways to get used to it, like over time. And I started experimenting with my arms, and at first I hated it. Like I still have a pillow, but I try some nights just to play with my arms, and it's starting to be even fun. Like it's fun to have your face against your hands to support you. It's just, and some movements are like feel good actually now. And I realized, I don't know if it was the same for you, that I switch my positions much more when I sleep now.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally find that too. And that makes sense, because like that's the other consequence of having lots of cushioning, like with our beds and our couches, is because we're not getting those pressure deforming movements, because they're not pushing against our body, we're not getting any sensory feedback into our body. And so we never get that impulse that we need to move. If it's really cushy, we just kind of sink into it. The cushion, the bed is conformed to the shape of our present shape of our body. And there's no impulse to tell us that we maybe should shift. And what's so cool about sleeping on a harder surface and on the floor is that I just naturally know when I kind of need to turn over or I need to move again. And I do find I move more. Which can bring up something like, the question is, some people might be really dealing with the inability to sleep. And so they might not find this very alluring or very appealing, because like, why would I want to make myself more uncomfortable? Because that's the problem is I'm already uncomfortable and I can't sleep. So why would I want to sleep somewhere where I'm not as comfortable and had to keep moving? Wouldn't that just keep me up all night? And so I think there's kind of like two ends of the spectrum I think you have to work with. And it's like, if you're really deprived of sleep, then you might need to find some other ways to get that first.
Yes.
And then start to, and if you choose to, then you can start to figure out how to also get more movement in our body. From this perspective, from our movement perspective, we're looking at like, how do we keep our bodies as mobile as possible, even, and how does our sleep positions help with that. And you can make a case for the other too. Like maybe one of the reasons you're not sleeping as well is because you have too much stiffness and soreness that isn't being worked out either throughout the day or while you're sleeping. And so you got to kind of find what works for you, definitely. But I love the fact that I'm actually moving and shifting. One of the, and I find like I'm using my arms in different ways while I'm sleeping on them. And I feel stretch, actually. I go, wow, like, I can feel like these chest muscles, shoulder muscles, lat muscles moving in ways that maybe I didn't get enough of during the day.
It's weird, again, how we created zones and context for moving in certain ways, like stretching. Like after workout, you stretch, or during yoga, you stretch in certain ways. But the idea, and we actually do this as it's like a classic stretch in so many
classic
sports.
Yoga stretch.
And when you imagine someone stretching, it's either the quad or this move, right? It's just almost, it's like just funny how it's our vision of stretching. But the idea of doing this in our bed and get rid of our pillow is so alien. And it's, but yet we do it and it feels good and we associate it with something positive. But you change the context and it's, oh, no. It's just,
I don't do that there. No, I wouldn't. never dream of it.
That can't be. But that's fun. I like how you say that we need to experiment, because like chronic pain and health is a very multi-factor problem and phenomenon. And there are so many elements, and maybe some people that wants to sleep better maybe should start with some habits such as closing the lights, having the same schedule. Like the posture while we sleep is just one element in
one element in the whole mixture of things. It's like when you were talking about earlier of chaos versus structure. There is a place for structure, in our sleep habits, because it's going to affect, and what you can get to is like, how do you get your structure to emulate nature as much as possible? Like where it's cooler, it's quieter, it's darker, and maybe it's at the same time where the sun goes down or the sun comes up. And once you start to emulate all those things, you might actually find yourself sleeping better. And then you can then also look at then how are you sleeping, and what are you using to sleep on?
And again, even the sleeping habits, it's fascinating to realize that historically and culturally, it's not always this idea of sleeping 8 hours. I don't know if you've read about it, but during some part of our history, we slept in 2 separate parts, and there was a break, or we would take a nap in the afternoon. And it's out of convenience that it's very practical right now to sleep a whole 8 hours so we can do a 9 to 5 at the job, because it's
absolutely. Yeah. No, I did read about that. I found that really fascinating. And there was those studies about like what people would do in the middle of the night. They would like sleep for 4 hours or so, wake up for a couple of hours, and do things, whether that would be gathering and around the fire or stories, or they would create things, but there would be certain activities that were often practiced around that time, and then they go back to bed for a while. And that's what they say is like, we are one of the only animals that gets all of its sleep in one chunk. And that's mainly because of what we think is normal and cultural. But it might not be the best. It might not be the most natural for us. And
I wonder.
Yeah. I think that has to do with, again, I think that comes back to like us trying to decide, and as long as we're aware that that is a possibility, we can start to experiment and try different things. And I remember back in college, just it's kind of funny. I had a friend who was a computer programmer who was studying to be a computer programmer, and he put himself onto a schedule that had nothing to do with the time of day. And he found himself like working like at weird hours at the night and then sleeping at weird hours during the day. And and it was just amazing. It probably wasn't the greatest for his health, but it was amazing to see that it was a possibility that he could consciously control and change.
I think the studies on sleep came up for people that were trying to optimize their workday. And this myth that we can only sleep 4 hours if we manage our time differently.
Yeah.
I know a friend who wanted to do that. He said, I can't sleep less, but I need to arrange my sleep differently. I think over time, you kind of realize you still need a big chunk of sleep. Like you need to sleep a certain amount.
Yeah.
So that's when the first time I heard about sleep was people who want, again, to do more productive work and rest less, like kind of.
Yeah. That's really, and I think that's I don't know if I'm hoping it's kind of going to be an old model, but it really is like this deeply enculturated belief that the only value we have is if we keep doing more and more and more and more. And so people are trying to hack their lives to figure out how to eliminate all the times when you're not being productive, including sleep. and so you can keep working and keep optimizing. And I really like the opposite version of that, which is, there's a couple of people that are kind of leaders in this. Tim Ferriss he was really popular, and is really popular in that realm where it's all about like working less, but getting more done. And there's another great author and business person, Kate Northrup, who is also the daughter of Christiane Northrup, who was a pioneer in women's health and bodies. Kate Northrup has just written a book not too long ago called Do Less. And it's all about the same principle that the truth is that if you are able to get rid of all that sort of clutter and unnecessary doing all the time, you can enjoy your life more and get more done. Mm-hmm. All these things come to mind. There's an old yoga, kind of joke dealing with meditation. A lot of people in that realms go, they're really busy and they go, I don't have time to meditate. I don't have 20 minutes to meditate. And the joke is that like most people need, for their best health to meditate 20 minutes a day. Those who say they don't have 20 minutes to meditate should meditate for 2 hours.
Mm-hmm. And if you don't do it, eventually life is going to stop you in a way or another by injuries or burnouts. I feel like my mononucleose 2 years ago was the ultimate call telling my body, you need to physically lay down and rest. And I think it took that in my life and to really become so quiet and get, like you said, you get rid of all the noise because you have so little energy. You have to decide where you put it. And you have to accept in this moment that you cannot do everything. So you have to choose. And once you start choosing, and when it's a blank slate, it was easier to reintegrate some stuff in. And I think it took me 2 years to even more to get to this place now where I feel like you say that I still have to shut the voice that tells me to do more all the time, for sure. But I feel more like powerful in the sense that I feel like I know how to manage my energy to move during the day and accomplish what's important to me instead of just following this treadmill of life that we all feel sometimes. And I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful, like the idea of like having the choice that we make powerful choices rather than making a million scattered choices.
Mm-hmm. Have you read the book Essentialism?
I haven't read that one yet. I've seen the title around, but
I think you would like. It's the same principles that you're talking about. We covered that book last week because it was like this just good framework that integrates very powerful concepts right now of and play and rest and focus and momentum. Like his the strength of the author is just to create this framework that integrates so many stuff that we hear about these days, and he calls it like going to the essential, finding what's essential to you, to and say no to all the trivial stuff so you can say yes to what's important. And I feel it's the same with movement. Like we feel like we have to do more, but we actually have to do what feels meaningful to us. And I think that's the way I see Renard. Our job is not to tell people what to do, but to show options so they can choose. And
yeah, and to be the examples, you know, of thriving as best as we can, you know, in whichever method that is working for us. That's why I like, you know, I use the word because it's, you know, it comes from my study, but I really I attune to the word of alignment a lot, and that's part of my, you know, my website is in aligned movement, because it's to me, it's a little deeper than just about like how we're moving, but it's like, what are you aligning to? Like, what are your values? What is it? What is your nature? What lights you up? And are you living and moving in a way is in alignment with that? Or are you trying to compartmentalize and give yourself the thing you need over here, but then doing a whole bunch of stuff that's not in alignment with your and true life and your true desires and the rest of your life? You know, and so again and again, I think we're coming to the idea that it's like, it's awareness and it's choice, and it's like being able to have the knowledge of what's going to make us healthiest, but also figuring out what is going to make us thrive most by continually directing our attention and our lives and our alignment in that way.
mm-hmm. And there's a difference. It's very hard to tell the difference between, I'm obsessed with this these days. How do you explain this feeling of thriving? And again, it's an inner feeling. That's the hard part. It's how you feel inside. And I was wondering, is it your background in the, because you also studied acting and theater, I think. Did it in your journey help you kind of bring this focus inward instead of like the entity that comes from intense sport? Is it linked?
Yeah, I think there's something there, because, you know, within well, you know, there's both, and because in an acting perspective, you spend a lot of time sort of kind of reflecting on like what's motivating you, you know, why would I say such a thing? Why would I do such a thing? What are people's intentions? And so there's a lot of inward focus in that way. The flip side of that is, I think in a performing aspect, there's a lot of outward focus too, because it's how am I being perceived? Am I getting the message across that I want someone to see? And I think that can actually be a detriment in these sort of things, because then maybe I'm trying to emulate something that's not really true to me myself. I mean, it might be great for a performer, you know, and trying to because that's their intention, is to try to show something. But I think in life we have to be, and I think this comes from all the movement, you know, training that I've done, from yoga to natural movement stuff to restorative exercise. I find them all to be really introspective practices. For me, I know a lot of people, you know, like to take, you know, yoga and natural movement can be very showy in a way, like, oh, look at all the cool tricks you can do. But for me, it's more about like, oh, what is happening for my body, and is that natural? Is it normal? Is it helping me? Is it hindering me? You know, is it causing more pain, or is it causing me to feel better? And the more, and so every practice, every class, every, you know, study I've done in those realms have really been to become more attuned to myself, you know, and back to the idea of alignment. How am I more aligned with myself?
And I think that one of the first questions to bring awareness is how do you feel?
Yeah.
Not only what you think, how do you feel? And like it's the same for movement. When you see someone climbing a tree and it's so cool, you can still have this sense of not being enough and wanting to do more. But if you think about how does climbing a tree make you feel, you want to feel the wind in your face, you want to smell the flowers around you, you want to feel the how do you call the skin of the tree?
The bark.
Yeah, you want to feel the bark
bark
on your hands. And those things are very hard to convey. It's just a very rich experience. And we forget that an experience can moving gives us a whole experience that is worthwhile aside from the mechanical aspect of it.
Yeah. Moving for movement's sake is its own reward, in many ways, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think our time's almost up. I forgot to check at what time we started, but I have still a few small questions to pursue my research on sleep, because I don't know if your conclusions were the same, but looking online about sleep, you get a lot of sources from mattresses companies and pillow companies.
Absolutely. Who has the most money in marketing will give you the most information, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I realized some blogs were they seem created only to do affiliate marketing that brings back to Amazon to sell mattresses.
Wow,
so
yeah.
I realized some companies, they do provide some very interesting content, for example, about the history of the bed, which is kind of valuable. It's very interesting to know how the people slept in Egypt on gold bells. I don't know. It was interesting, but it's not those sources that brings a critical view of how we sleep, or just an innovative view of maybe we don't need a bed, or we can reinvent the bed. So on your side, I was curious to know, aside from Michael Tetley, did you find some valuable sources or experts in the world that just brought a rich view and help you reimagine how you sleep and move while you sleep?
Yeah, it's like I've read a few books on sleep in general, and I think it's good for just the understanding of like our modern day culture and the things that we should be taking into account. There's one called Why We Sleep is a nice book. It's kind of science oriented about just like what are the sleep cycles and what it's doing for us, why we need it, and all that kind of stuff. Matthew Whitaker, I believe, is the author's name. I don't remember right offhand. Of course, there's Katie Bowman's work. Like she's got some great blog articles that are all about sleep postures and transitioning to a floor, more of a harder floor-based sleeping environment. One thing I don't think we got into a lot, but is worth mentioning along with Katie Bowman's work is that we give out these examples of like, let's start sleeping on the floor instead of a bed, and that's all good, and that's a good place to aspire to. But it's kind of the same as going like, I'd like to be able to run 20 miles or climb a tree. If I'm not adapted to it, if I try too hard and try too fast to make that happen, you can actually cause yourself a lot of discomfort. And so I always like to just remind everybody that everything should be kind of a gradual progression, So if sleeping on the floor is really uncomfortable for you and you just can't sleep, well, maybe you just try laying on the ground for, 15 minutes before you go to bed, and then, or maybe then you just sleep on the floor for an hour and then you go back to bed, and you can just sort of toggle back and forth and play with both aspects. And I think that's a good reminder. And same thing with a pillow, it's like, don't go like all the way to no pillow right away if that's going to make you, have cramps in your neck, but start to slowly decrease the amount of pillow until until your body adapts to it. Another good one, it's an interesting book. It's more just about like modern lifestyle, but Arianna Huffington's book, oh gosh, what is the title? You can find it, but it's on Actually, I think I have it right here if I just look real quick. Her book is called The Sleep Revolution. It's really good. It's really good, and it's describing on like the need for sleep and how it's going to make us more productive and healthier and happier all around. That's a really good book to look at. You know, it's not about sleep per se, but this is, I find this gives you the context of culture and the evolution of culture and rethinking it. Is a book called The Chair. And it's actually about chairs. And this book is amazing because it takes you through the history of the invention of chairs all the way up to modern times. And one part of the book is really about, you know, cultural reasons for the chair, and then which are really fascinating. That has nothing to do with comfort per se, but hierarchy. You know, it's like those who sat on chairs were literally higher than all the other people on the ground. And so that gave them a sense of importance. And then all of a sudden chairs are now ubiquitous because we all want to be important, I guess. But then there's another section of the book which is all about the architecture of the chair and the how chairs evolved over the millennia. And then the third section of the book is actually a little bit about the health effects of a chair and how it's changing our bodies. And that's an amazing book to read for this context too, because it will give you a perspective of something that we just see as normal and realize that, oh wow, this wasn't always normal. And it is having an effect on my body that I might not be aware of. And that can really help. And it helped me just to start to think about, okay, maybe there's a good reason to sleep on the floor.
But I like this idea of transition, because again, like sleeping on the floor is not necessarily the end result. And if it is the end result, it can take a long time to get there. And
there's lots of steps in between.
One of our friends kind of made the transition when he saw our space, and I knew he had trouble sleeping, and he switched, he bought another type of mattress, and he asked me, what did you do, you and Vince? And I realized that we didn't need a transition because we slept on very shitty mattresses before. It was not before we had to, I slept in a single bed for almost all my 20s, and it was a bad mattress. And then when I had a real one, I put it underground just because I think I liked it. It was easier and cheaper. And then Vince slept in a van, it was a plywood plank and some type of futon. So I realized that this transition, we lived it. We did have a transition, but we didn't realize it. And it built some type of resilience. And so it was easier. We try to be careful not to say that sleeping on the floor is the solution for everyone right now, because we know it's not that easy. But it's interesting, again, just to bring the spark of this chair. It's everywhere, but it was not always this way. What was the game before? What happened before that?
And it's different in different cultures. You know, there's places in other parts of the world where they don't use chairs as much, you know, and the squatting is much more prevalent, and same with beds and sleeping. And so it's a lot of it is, you know, some of our perspective so much is cultural centric, you know, it's like we think where we live is all that is. And so I think it's just a beautiful thing to learn how other people are living, and then to say, oh, well, maybe I like that. Oh, maybe I could try that and see if it helps you.
Yeah, it's true that I got a lot of inspiration, not studying beds because there's not always all that much to read about, but also doing the parallel like you did with the chair with how we sit to eat. And there was a very interesting news report on a guy in some prisons. There are indigenous people that are allowed to eat traditional food. So he goes up north and he brings back food. And the way they ate was they put cardboard on the floor and they put the food in the middle, and everybody was sitting on the ground picking food. And it was so communal and festive.
Yeah.
So then I thought, seeing that, I cannot be convinced anymore by a table company that I absolutely need a table. It's just, there's no going back, right? So.
And that's actually something that I'm hoping to do at some point. We have this like countertop high table, and I'd love to cut the legs off of it and drop it down to the ground. You did?
I did.
Fantastic.
And we loved it. Again, because I saw my sister-in-law, she went to live in Japan. And when she invited us over, she now has a little table, and it seems it's very fun. And so when I came back home, we cut the legs, and yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. The last thing, the one other thing that like getting rid of these sort of tables and chairs and beds that it does for us, it just opens up all the possibilities that, like, because it's back to that idea that we started with a long time ago, the casts, like we tend to sit in one particular way in a chair. We tend to lay in a bed in just a very few particular ways. But giving ourselves just a wider open space on the floor allows us to sit in like 100 different ways, 1,000 different ways, and which is basically a lot of all of the practice of yoga is, I mean, a large part of it is how do you sit on the floor and make your body adaptable enough so that it is comfortable being in one place for a long period of time.
Yeah. Yoga has a positive view of the floor, which is, again, another thing that really helped me.
Exactly.
Seeing sitting on the floor as valuable and interesting, to feel the ground support you, this idea that the ground supports you and it's not only something you walk on that is dirty. Like, yeah, it's just another world. Yeah.
It's totally different. Yeah.
Well, I loved our discussion. I feel like I could talk with you on so many other subjects.
I could just keep going on all day. Just
like chatting. I had so many things popping up in my head, and I had to kind of just accept that we cannot cover everything and talk forever. But I loved it. I feel so energized.
Yeah, me as well. Thank you.
And so if people want to know more about the video you did on YouTube about sleep specifically, because you have videos online, you also did a class, an hour class on position. So maybe we can wrap up by actually presenting what do you offer with in aligned movements, your company, and where people can follow you.
Yeah. So my company, my website is inalignedmovement.com. And yeah, I offer classes in restorative exercise and natural movement. And, both of those I feel like are ends of the spectrum where natural movement is giving you the skills and capabilities to move naturally like a human. And restorative exercise is helping us do away with the adaptations of modern society and help us become more natural humans so that we can do those natural movements. It helps us realign our body so that it works easier and more functionally. So I teach classes, and right now, especially because of the whole coronavirus and everything, I've moved pretty much everything online. I'm doing classes on Zoom, and my sleep class, or it's not really about sleeping, it's about moving, but based on the sleep postures, is one of the classes on my virtual class library that you can subscribe to, where I'm just putting up new classes all the time that you can access online at any time. So I have that, my website. There is the YouTube channel, the Infinite Movement channel. But that's mostly going to be starting to transfer over to more of my Instagram stuff, which is Patrick OG on Instagram. And yeah, we just recently did me and a couple other trainers got together and we did an Instagram challenge that we called Aligned Home Movement. So if you look up the hashtag Aligned Home Movement, we're just exploring all these different ideas of like, how do you get more movement in at your home? Whether it's how do you do different chores differently? How do you use the structures of your home differently? And, you know, it's great inspiration for getting more movement in your life.
And I think it's going to become a class or a program in itself, right? This experiment will become something bigger.
Yeah, that's exactly my intention right now. Is I'm going to start, like I did with the sleep class, I'm going to start adding in, or I'm going to start developing more full-length classes that are going to at first go up on my virtual class library. So you can, you know, participate and play along and explore with me there on figuring out home movement classes, just using different parts of the home. And so that's a good resource. Oh, I wanted to offer too, for anybody that might be listening, yourself as well, I made you can get a discount code for my virtual class library if anybody wants to come check it out.
Oh,
and
sure.
It's the code, if you go to my website and when you sign up, the code is going to be I am, which is in aligned movement, IAM dash Renard. You know, so.
Oh, Renard. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So for anybody who wants to come and check it out, you know, I'd invite you to come and play along with me.
Perfect. I registered, and I follow the one on the sleeping postures, and I'm gonna check the rest. And I'll follow you for the home, because with Renard we have this expression of maison vivante, which would translate to alive.
Yeah, alive, like furniture.
Lively home.
Lively homes. Yeah.
Alive. We translate it to lively home. This idea that we want to feel the life inside of us and around us. So for sure I'll follow you, and I'm not surprised that you cover themes that really resonate.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I'm so excited about the stuff that you guys are doing.
I'll translate. I can. I guess Google can translate our website for you, right? Some parts, because.
Yeah, I'll see if I can. Yeah, I know. I'll have to brush up. I don't actually know any French, but except for 2 words or so.
Yeah, you might be able to understand a few stuff thanks to Google. That can translate it, but we'll keep in touch and discuss in English. I feel that it's on the last discussion we're gonna have.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, I can't wait to continue.
Yeah, so thanks so much for being here. I wish you a lovely day. It seems to be beautiful outside, so we can have some dose of nature.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm about to go outside myself as well with the dogs and take a walk in the park.
Thanks.
All right, take care. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Nice to meet you. Bye-bye.